Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Gina from Her Cosmic Crown. Today I will be discussing Bhavas, which is Sanskrit for houses or house cusps. The houses are very important because they give us a unique interpretation of what's going on in our charts, and it gives us more depth. It gives us more information. We can only know the houses of each sign if we know when a person is born. If we don't know when a person is born, we don't know their houses or anything like that. The Bhavas are based on the sequential order of the signs naturally, right? So the first house naturally corresponds to the description of Aries. So it has that similar flavor to it. The second house is very similar to Taurus. So you're going to hear some things that sound like Taurus. The third house sounds like Gemini, and so on and so forth. So if you want to know the order of the signs, please take a look at my previous video that I made on each of the zodiac signs. Based on the exact moment you were born, there was a sign that was rising on the eastern horizon. And whatever that sign was, that becomes your first house. Let's say when you were born, I don't know, Aquarius was rising on the eastern horizon. So Aquarius becomes your first house. What comes after Aquarius? We have Pisces. Then the third house would be Aries, and so on and so forth. The first house represents the self, okay? It represents who we are. It represents how we look, and it shows our personality, and it also represents the path that we're on. Okay, so what kind of path are we on? Is this a difficult path? What is on our path, right? So this is the first house. This is also known as our Ascendant. It's also known as our Lagna, and in some ways the first house can represent our health. The second house represents our resources. It represents things that we can take care of. In turn, those things taking care of us. For example, say we have a garden, that's something we take care of. And because we take care of that garden, we can benefit from the fruits and vegetables or medicine or whatever the case may be. The second house also represents our self-worth. What kind of worth are we getting? What is our worth? And a lot of our self-worth is reflected by what we're taking care of. So if we're taking care of our family, that can make us feel good. We feel like, okay, I'm worthy, you know, I gotta stay alive because I'm valuable to someone else, right? I have to take care of this dog. So this dog is relying on me. So you're valuable somehow. So there is a connection between what we take care of and our worth, our value. And the second house also represents our families. Second house represents our resources as well. Our resources, this represents our money, but it's not our money in terms of like spending in excess or anything like that. That would be more of the fourth house, which has to do with our fortune. This has more to do with, you know, taking care of our basic needs, taking care of the people around us, people we are responsible for. The third house has to do with working with teams or associates with whom we have a common goal, and we work with them towards this goal, okay? The third house is a social house. It's also the house of competition. So we could be competitive with other people. And this often starts with our siblings because the third house represents our siblings. So there can be some kind of competition, and we can be competitive with teammates as well. Siblings, associates. This house also represents our courage, the courage it takes to train, to fight towards something. The third house isn't necessarily an easy house because it requires action. It requires you know, kind of tilling the soil, trying to get things done. It requires putting our back into something and some kind of training. And this is a house of skills, so we can be working towards bettering our skills on some level. And it's also a house of learning something, you know, learning something new. The fourth house, it represents the home. It represents the mother or mother figure in our lives. It represents our emotions, our capacity for happiness, and things that are generally safe and comforting for us. The fourth house is a hidden house. You know, it's this inner world, so it can represent our emotions, our hidden emotions. It's the parts of us that we don't readily show the world. The fifth house is a lucky house that has to do with our unique, creative endeavors. It represents our individuality, our individual self-expression. It's our creative intelligence as well. This can be a house that has to do with, you know, certain spiritual practices that we may have. It has to do with higher education. It's a house of gambling or taking risks of some sort. It's also a house that represents children. And so when you want to look at your children or what a person's children might be like, you would want to look at the fifth house. The sixth house is the house of obstacles and real world problems that we have to encounter on a day-to-day basis. These aren't things that are necessarily fun. It's not a bad thing per se, but it can represent obstacles and delays. The good thing about the sixth house, it represents wounds, and wounds can eventually heal. So we can eventually heal, get better. So any planets in the sixth house, those can get better with time. A big thing that the sixth house signifies is our health. So the sixth house is the health house. It's also the house of debt, so it rules debts and things like that, things that we owe, our karmic debts, financial debts. Yeah, it's just things that we have to take care of. These are life skills that we need. So a person with maybe an afflicted sixth house may have you know, trouble getting things done, being on top of their material responsibilities, taking care of the bills. That's the sixth house, you know, paying the bills on time, going to work. Okay, so the sixth house has to do with work, and it can be drudgerous for us a lot of times, you know. Yes, there can be great things about work, but there's certain parts of our work, even if we enjoy our work, that we don't like doing. There's always something, you know, there's paperwork, there's calling people back, there's this and that. So the sixth house is real world problems. However, because this is an earth sign and it has to do with the material world, when we have a healthy sixth house, when we are on top of, you know, our stuff in life, we're taking care of our debt, we're taking care of our health, we're taking care of what we need to take care of, we can reap the rewards, right? We can live a healthy financial life, material life. Our bodies are taken care of. We're not getting sick that often because we are taking care of this vessel. The seventh house. So the opposite of the seventh house is the first house. So if we look at the first house has to do with the self, the individual. Now we're on the seventh house, which has to do with the other person. It has to do with the person who is not like us, the opposite of us, okay? And the seventh house often relates to the spouse, or, you know, has to relate to the marriage itself. And the seventh house has to do with business partners as well as trading, you know, win-win situations and things like that. and making sure that both parties is getting their fair share. That's the 7th house. The 7th house also has to do with foreign travel, especially when it comes to some kind of trade negotiation and things like that. It's not traveling for the deep philosophical connections and things like that. That's more of the 9th house. And then also the 7th house has to do with the public, and relating to the public and how the public sees you. So this, you know, we can see this a lot with celebrities, because the celebrities rely on the public for their popularity, and it's part of their career. The 8th house is an intense house. It has to do with things that we are not prepared for, and so those things can seem like a huge crisis happening in our lives. The 8th house, at the same time, even though it can seem like a chaotic house, it's a moksha house. So it's through this chaos, through these things that we are not ready for, that we can go within. So if these things didn't happen, we wouldn't see as much growth in our lives. So this 8th house is intense. However, that intensity can help us and to go within and have that inner transformation. So the 8th house is an extremely transformative house. It's also the house of endings and death and things breaking, right? And it's a hidden house, so it could be something that you don't realize is breaking, but it's breaking, and it's eventually going to break, and it's going to break unexpectedly. And the 8th house is an intense house, but it's through that intensity that can lead us to the ultimate transformation, to alchemizing this negative situation and transforming it into something that is more useful and helpful, and that's helpful for our growth in general. Lastly, this house has to do with the occult sciences such as astrology, and you know, tarot, and so many of those things. It's also a house of things that are not culturally acceptable, and those are things like astrology that haven't really been culturally acceptable. It's still not really culturally acceptable, but you know, the 8th house has to do with those things that the cultures, you know, a certain culture does not accept. The 9th house is a lucky house that has to do with our beliefs, and our beliefs were usually instilled in us by our parents or whoever our guardians were. And so the 9th house has to do with our parents, our guardians, and this can be a philosophical house. It can be a house of cultures as well, of one's own culture, or maybe a person traveling and discovering other beliefs and cultures. And so this house represents long distance travels, whereas the opposite house, which is the 3rd house, represents short distance travels. And the 9th house has to do with higher levels of learning, philosophy, and things like that. And when we travel to and visit other cultures and see the way other people do it, and we view their perception of things, that helps us to understand more of our own culture and what we appreciate about our culture and what we appreciate about other people's cultures. But if we just stay in our own culture or our own belief, we don't have anything else to compare it to. So that's the 9th house that goes outside of its comfort zone, outside of its community, and goes to a different realm and finds a lot of knowledge and takes that back to their own community and can potentially teach others what they have learned. So the 9th house has to do with teaching as well. The 10th house is at the zenith And this is the house where we wield our power as a leader. So we can see people who have a stacked and healthy 10th house in leadership positions, or in positions where they're in power or they're in this kind of dominant role. And the 10th house can, often represent the career. It represents how we show up in the world. The opposite house is the 4th house, which is being in the home, or it is the home, and the 10th house is being in the world, basically. The 10th house can represent the father as an individual, and it's our individual dharmic path that we are here to walk. It's not the path of other people or being swayed by other people's opinions, but it's the house that we are here for. This is the house that represents the path that we are meant to walk on, our inspired path. The 11th house, this house represents the gains that we can get from our career. The 11th house is the second from the 10th house, okay? So this is the resources we can get from our career. And this can include, recognition, titles, degrees, promotions. The 5th house, which is the opposite house, represents the love that we give to others, right? So it's like this abundance of love that we have within, and we share that with others. And the 11th house, it's the house of receiving love, and it's getting that love from other people. It's a social house, and it's also the house of groups, networking, and things like that, and just receiving love and validation and respect from other people based on your actions, based on your dharmic path, based on how you walk your life. You're getting validation from the world based on what you're here to do. Again, the 11th house is the second from the 10th house. And last but not least, we have the 12th house. The 12th house has to do with isolated places, confined places. These include libraries, ashrams. This includes prisons as well. Did I mention libraries? Hospitals, anywhere there's confinement. And this confinement can be, confined and not feeling very liberated. You can be confined, because of prison, or a person can be confined because they want to learn something. So they're in a library, they're in a laboratory, studying something, contemplating. They could be in an ashram, contemplating, meditating. So the 6th house, which is the opposite house, has to do with real world problems that we talked about. It's some kind of karmic duty that we're having to pay off. So it could be, some kind of work that a person has to do, not necessarily what they're inspired to do, but it's something to take care of their material duties. And then the 12th house is more of escaping that. So people escape the real world in different ways. Some people do it through drugs and alcohol. Other people do it by meditating. Others do it by studying and contemplating and things like that. And others do it by playing video games. A lot of people play video games, and that's one way to escape the real world. Watching movies, going to spas, you get the picture. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any specific questions regarding Vedic astrology in terms of the basics and things like that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.